Swords giving off a powerful slicing shockwave are a staple in fantasy and especially in anime, and while powerful characters being able to swing a 3-meter long sword in order to bridge a 1000-meter distance are great, ranged sword attacks would be an incredibly niche thing to have, and something that most fantasy militaries would openly disregard, employing it as a stopgap measure at most. And this sounds surprising, since being able to engage in a ranged battle with your melee weapon would generally be very beneficial. Not only could a sword fighter target archers on watchtowers without having to throw his own sword, his weapon, but he could also be able to get the first hit on any melee combatant that approaches him, or on monsters, without having to risk his own skin in a more direct engagement, where the risk that the enemy could actually hit back is considerably higher than by attacking from, let's say, 10 meters away. But here's the thing, all of these benefits of being able to engage in a ranged battle and in melee fights is something that simply having a sidearm could also do. A crossbowman could still wield a sword or spear as a sidearm and gets in a defensive formation as soon as he hears the signal and form a spear wall if, for example, the cavalry is charging his high ground position. And an axe-wielding barbarian would be able, thanks to his enormous muscles, to actually use the heaviest of warbows in order to not only hit targets, but also punch straight through any armor. And here's the thing about specialization. Specialized ranged weapons will be much better and more precise at ranged combat than a melee weapon swung in the direction of the enemy. Not to mention that swinging your weapon away from your body in a wide arc, as to hit the archer in the back, would leave you wide open to the swordman you are dueling with. Besides, the archer would be wise not to fire into melee combat, lest he will hit his own man. Terms and conditions may apply to this Skaven. And once the man has been cut into two, both combatants are free to use their specific ranged weapons until one of them can't use it anymore or simply runs out of ammunition. And speaking of ammunition, no matter how strong you are and how fast you can swing your sword, being able to form a stable pressure wave that could precisely hit one enemy and do actual damage over distance, rather than it just dissipating after a few meters, and thus losing all of its destructive potential, would require a huge amount of mana and an incredible ability to form and control it. So it would most likely require most of the warrior's rather low mana reserves, or a magic caster would be needed to produce the shockwave reliably and repeatedly. If that is the case, then the magic caster could just use some magic of his very own, the fireball spell for example, and the warrior could simply resort to a great bow, or a crossbow, or maybe just a sling, instead of risking most of his mana reserves to produce a single stable shockwave that might hit an enemy. But still a decently strong warrior with a decently high mana pool, being able to use some of his mana to transfer all of this destructive energy of his sword over a couple of meters would make sense for small parties of adventurers or solo fighters. But as far as the military would be concerned, it would be likely much cheaper to just provide a spear or short sword as a sidearm to a crossbowman or a bowman, or just to a slingerman, than to train warriors who will be fighting at the front lines to attack from the distance, especially since long spears or phalanxes would be used to actually bridge a few meter distance or put some distance between yourself and the enemy while still being able to inflict damage. And as far as range is concerned, the average bow or crossbowman will likely, given equal training and financial investment from the side of the military, outrange the average ranged sword swing by multiple times And since both don't work via mana, but via one's own body strength and aim, anyone could use one, and ammunition would be the limiting factor. And even for most adventurers operating in the famous group of 4 individuals, it would be much more efficient to actually just carry a sling and some stones with you, than going to all of the time and effort to learn such an advanced technique. And finally, the maintenance cost would need to be addressed for unleashing a shockwave strong enough to actually hurt the enemy. An enemy clad in armor and wielding a shield, the shockwave would likely also damage or put an immense amount of stress on the sword that it is unleashed from. So for most adventurers, even if they can use the technique, it would be more of a last resort, since most standard swords would be unable to deal with the stress and blowback it would put on them. So aside from legendary weapons bathed in mana, wielded by legendary swordmasters, ranged swords would have surprisingly little use in most battles. And with that said, now it's your turn. What are your thoughts about ranged swords, sending out shockwaves that will slice through your opponents? Let me know it down in the comment section. And while you type, I say thank you very much for watching and have a nice day.